So yeah, I've talked to you in about 8 minutes to try and condense all of climate science into that very short presentation, so wish me luck. If we could go to the next slide, I'd just like to start off in the interest of audience participation by asking a question. This is a bit risky. How does climate change make you feel? Which is not the typical question you'd be asking in a science-related presentation. Would someone like to put forward their thoughts on how climate change makes you feel?
Worried.
Worried, thank you. Anxious, yeah. Any others? Sad, yeah. I think these are all completely rational thoughts and responses to what is a very concerning issue, and I'll outline where we're at and where we need to get to in the next few slides. Thank you. So many of you will be aware that over the last 12 months, a series of reports have come out from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Their 6th assessment report, which consists of 3 reports, focus on the physical science, on impacts, and on what we need to do about it, on mitigation. And it's worth saying as well, this is the 6th assessment report. The first report was back in 1990, and it's fair to say we haven't really listened to what the scientists have been saying in terms of taking meaningful action. Okay, if we just go to the next slide. So headline statements from the most recent reports. The report said it's unequivocal that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean and land. The scale of the recent changes that we've been seeing is unprecedented in human times. The levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere now, for example, are higher than they've been for at least 2 million years. We're playing a very dangerous game with our atmosphere and the associated impacts that has upon people and natural systems. If we go to the next slide, thanks. So hopefully this video will play. And it should be relatively self-explanatory. Each of these names are countries around the world. And you'll see the date at the top here going from 1880 up to the present day. And the size of the circle and the colour of the circle gives an indication of how warm or cold things were in that country in that particular year. And you can see as we move through into the 1950s and 1960s, you'll start to pick up a trend, particularly in the last couple of decades, of just what we're seeing. So we've now already seen a 1.2 degree rise approximately in global temperatures compared to the pre-industrial era, and that will continue to change as long as we don't take meaningful action about it. So that's where we're at now. And if you want to chat to me later, it's also depicted in this tie as well. There's each individual year going back to 1850. There we go. Cool. And so in terms of some of the other key messages from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's report, they say that climate change is already having a significant effect on weather extremes from around the world. Barely a day goes by when we don't see something in the news about an extreme weather event. We've had within the last week parts of India and Pakistan hitting close to 50 degrees. We had Spain exceeding their May record, the hottest ever temperature in May a few days ago. And this will continue to get worse if we don't take sufficient action. If we go to the next slide. And this is having an impact, as well as having an impact on the natural world, it's having an impact on our young people as well. So we had some of the kind of responses of feeling sad, of feeling worried, of feeling anxious. These are entirely rational responses to what is a concerning issue. So various studies have been conducted over the last few years that see that particularly amongst young people, people are worried about their future. They're worried about the world in which they grow up. They're scared about it. And it's a combination of feeling scared of the changes they're seeing around and also perceiving that our leaders are not doing enough to tackle this issue. They're feeling let down by adults, essentially. And so in terms of what needs to be done about it, the IPCC are clear that the kind of thresholds that have been set out of 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees as the key temperature thresholds we absolutely must avoid, particularly that 2 degrees. They will be exceeded this century without deep reductions in carbon dioxide emissions in the next few decades. And if we go to the next slide, so a few years ago, the IPCC published another report, and they concluded that to avoid a 1.5 degree rise in global temperatures, which is essential to avoid that, particularly for the countries in the global south who are most vulnerable to warming climate, we need to roughly halve emissions of greenhouse gases from where we are now by 2030. That's unprecedented in terms of the scale of changes that we need to see in greenhouse gas emissions around the world. And just to give an indication of what some of these things means, because these numbers can often be quite abstract, in the 1.5 degree world, coral reefs, which are one of the most beautiful things, as you're all aware, we have on our planet, sustaining an abundance of biodiversity, in a 1.5 degree world, which is 0.3 degrees warmer than now, almost 70 to 90% of coral reefs will look like this. They'll be bleached. In a 2 degree world, effectively all the coral reefs around the world are gone. Okay, so that's what we stand to lose. One of the most beautiful things we have in our entire planet, we stand to lose if we don't take much more action now. And if we go on to the next slide, just to give you an indication of the kind of human side of stuff, this is some pictures from the summer that we had 4 years ago, which was a record equaling summer at the time. If we go to a 1.5 degree rise, so 0.3 degrees warmer than now, That summer, which was record equalling at the time, will occur once every 4 years. If we go to a 2-degree rise, which we're on course to do in around 40 years' time at the current trajectory, then that summer will be an average summer. The summer which caused so much disruption to our transport infrastructure, to our housing, that will be an average summer. And of course, as that becomes an average summer, so the extremes become even more extreme. Okay, so there's some of the stuff, some of the bad side of stuff. So moving on to the kind of the positive aspect and the kind of solution side of stuff is, because the good news is what's good for climate change is invariably good for our health and good for so many other parts of society. Tackling this issue has so many synergies with other issues. So by tackling climate change, we can benefit health, we can make sure everyone can breathe clean air, that we can all live in homes that we can afford to heat, we can improve our energy security by being less reliant on expensive oil and gas and all the geopolitical implications that reliance on that has. We can boost our own economy, reduce unemployment, help to alleviate poverty and housing and so on. And I guess the next slide tries to give an indication that wherever we are at any moment in time, there's always a better and a worse path that we can take. So we can go down the route on the left-hand side of destroying our coral reefs, or we can go down the route, depicted on the right-hand side, of taking much more action on climate change to create a future for our kids and young people and all of us that we really want to see, which brings so many other synergies with it as well. And just to finish off on the kind of last slide, you may not be able to see it at the back. This was a cartoon from 2009, which is one of my favourite cartoons. And at the time, there were still some sceptics around. There still are, I guess, but more so then. And so this is a cartoon with someone on the stage in the climate summit basically listing all the things that climate action can bring. Energy independence, preserving rainforests, sustainability, green jobs, livable cities, and so on. And someone in the audience says, what if it's a big hoax and we created a better world for nothing? Okay. And so there's lots of things. I'm delighted to be here today. I think the programme you're running is fantastic to inspire the next generation of young people to take more meaningful action. We need much more action on multiple scales. We need much more climate leadership. Schools, anchor institutions are so important in helping to embed that change in their local area and inspire those around us. Really delighted to be here today. Many thanks for your time, and I look forward to catching up.